Just imagine you're George Washington. It's 1775. You've just been handed command of the brand new Continental Army. You ride into camp, expecting to find these disciplined, patriotic soldiers just raring to go. But instead, you find something so completely chaotic that you write this in a letter. And that jarring reality? Well, that's exactly where our story begins.
You see, the American Revolution wasn't just a war against the British. No. First, it was an internal struggle, a fight to create an American army out of thin air. And honestly, it was a fight that almost doomed the entire cause before it even got started.
All right, so here's what we're going to dive into. We'll look at this army of strangers, Washington's grand vision for it, the clash over who should lead, the absolute misery they went through, and finally, how they forged a real American army out of all that chaos.
Okay, let's go back to that camp outside Boston. Washington shows up and finds almost 20,000 guys. But here's the thing. It's not an army. It's more like a giant, sprawling festival of different colonial militias. And every single one has its own rules, its own leaders, its own vibe. And to really get your head around just how different their mindset was, all you have to do is meet one guy, Private David Howe.
So this is Private Howe. His diary is amazing. It gives us this incredible peek into their world. Soon after he gets there, he takes his army-issued musket and sells it to a colonel for a profit. Then he gets another one and sells that one too. And get this, nobody saw this as insubordination. It was just, good business.
And the lines just kept getting blurrier. His own lieutenant, a guy named David Chandler, had actually borrowed money from him. When the poor guy died of smallpox, his brother showed up to settle the debt with Private Howe. I mean, this is not the relationship between a superior officer and a subordinate, right? This is more like two acquaintances who just happen to be on a military adventure together.
And right there, that's the heart of the conflict. Washington came in with this vision, modeled after the British, of a professional army. You've got a strict hierarchy where officers are gentlemen, way above their men. But what he actually found was this democratic, almost commercial culture, where guys elected their officers from their own towns and basically treated them like equals. You can just see it, right? These two completely different worlds were on a total collision course.
So, yeah, Washington knew this just wasn't going to work. You can't build a real army on that kind of foundation. For him, the answer had to start right at the very top. If he was going to get a professional army, he first needed professional officers. And in his world, that meant one thing. They had to be gentlemen.
Now, when Washington said gentlemen, he was really talking about honor. But honor back then was a bit different than how we think of it. It wasn't just about being a good person in private. No, it was all about your public reputation, a kind of status that your community saw in you and agreed you had. That was the real source of your authority to lead.
So with this idea of honor in his head, Washington got to work trying to fix the system. He made it clear that officer commissions weren't going to be popularity contests anymore. From now on, they'd be handed down from the top to men he believed had the social standing and the merit, the honor, to actually command respect.
But, of course, this plan hit a massive snag right away. The problem was, every colony had its own completely different idea of what made a good leader. And this just created non-stop arguments over who should be what rank, who had to listen to who, basically where authority even came from in the first place. And this table here, it lays it all out perfectly. In Massachusetts, you were a leader because your town said you were. You were buddies with your soldiers. In Pennsylvania, it was even more democratic, all about group agreement. But then you look at Virginia, and it was much more like Washington's ideal, based on social class and owning land, very hierarchical. I mean, how on earth are you supposed to build one single army out of these totally different ways of thinking?
And as if all that cultural drama wasn't enough, the army was getting slammed by the brutal day-to-day realities of war. Trying to create a single standard for discipline felt impossible, and the terrible economics of the war were just grinding everybody down.
Just look at military justice, for example. The differences were absolutely wild. Up in New England, because of their religious beliefs, the most you could be punished was 39 lashes. But in South Carolina, a soldier could get hit with 800 lashes. This wasn't just a small policy difference. It showed a deep, fundamental disagreement on how to keep soldiers in line.
And then you had the money problem. The Continental dollar was basically becoming monopoly money. By 1780, hyperinflation was so out of control that a single uniform coat for an officer cost $2,000. $2,000. Officers, soldiers, everybody was broke, freezing and starving. Morale was hanging on by a thread. Okay, so things are looking grim. But then, during that awful winter at Valley Forge, a hero arrives.
a Prussian officer named Baron von Steuben. And he had a brilliant, simple system. First, he created one perfect model company. He drilled those 100 guys himself until they were flawless. Then, he used them to train a new group of inspectors. And finally, those inspectors went out and trained every single regiment in the army. It was a genius train-the-trainer program, and for the first time, everyone was marching and fighting the exact same way.
So after all that, did Washington finally get the professional British-style army he dreamed of? Well, no, not really. What emerged after 8 long years of fighting, compromising, and just surviving together was something else entirely, something new and something uniquely American.
This new American military tradition wasn't about where you came from, but what you could do. Leadership was based on merit that was proven on the battlefield, not by your family name. Authority wasn't just given, it was earned through competence and trust. And discipline? That started to come from good training and mutual respect, not just the fear of punishment. This might not have been the army Washington first wanted, but it was absolutely the army America needed.
And that's the key, right? That's why this whole messy, painful process mattered so much. The transformation itself, going from a bunch of squabbling militias to a cohesive fighting force, was the very thing that made them strong enough to endure starvation, to bounce back from defeats, and, in the end, to actually win the war. The Army didn't just win the war, it became the first truly national institution in America.
So it really makes you think, doesn't it? We always imagine an army is built on rigid discipline and endless drills, but the story of the Continental Army shows us that maybe, just maybe, the strongest bonds aren't forged by what you practice, but by what you manage to survive together.